Garrett, thanks for joining me today. Really excited to tell your SMU story. I know we got some fans that are excited to hear about this other side of you. If you would, please introduce yourself to our audience.
What's going on, Mitch? First of all, thanks for having me. My name is Garrett Gilbert. We'll call it SMU Class of 2013. I'm originally from Austin, Texas. Did my undergrad down at Texas, and then found a home up here on the hilltop for 2 really fun years of football, and Dallas is, and especially SMU, has been home ever since.
What did a kid growing up in Austin think about just kind of DFW Dallas as a potential place to even live, or kind of what, not even SMU related, what did you kind of think of Dallas as a city as a kid growing up in Austin?
I honestly did not know a lot about Dallas. My family's from California. My parents essentially picked Austin on a map, and so I didn't know a ton about Texas at all. And even less about Dallas necessarily. So when I came up here to SMU, I was frankly drawn by June Jones and what he was doing with the football program, and then I fell in love with the campus, and I thought everything was just beautiful up here. And I had no clue that it was. I mean, it was just such an awesome little piece of real estate there, right in the middle of Dallas. And so I was pretty much an outsider. I say an outsider. I was pretty much moving into the unknown.
And we'll talk about how you leaned into that network and kind of that where it took you to today. But, for those who don't know, you grew up in a football family, right? Your dad played in the NFL, brother who played college football. Is that kind of your mentality as a young adult, high school, kind of obviously knew well recruited, but were there other interests for Garrett at that time, or was it, hey, it's football or bust?
Yeah, I think, and I think we'll probably talk about this a little bit as we talk about, getting into what life after football looked like. But back then it was just, it was football. I mean, like you said, my dad played. I grew up, my first memories were throwing a football to myself in the living room, and it was all I ever wanted. And Texas became the only school I ever wanted to go to and play quarterback there. And so it was kind of all football all the time. I mean, I don't want to say that I necessarily didn't have other interests. I mean, I love to argue. My mom always told me I should try and go into law school.
Yeah.
That obviously did not work out, but my brain is kind of analytically math driven, so I always thought that'd be fun. But it was pretty much football all the time.
So we've had a couple former SMU athletes and athletes on our SMU Stories podcast to kind of talk about that experience. I imagine every school is a little bit different about commitment to your team versus the time you have to develop that student aspect, right? So we know a little bit about what it's like for an SMU student through this, but what's it like at Texas in those early years? How committed are we? What's kind of the schedule? What's it like as a student athlete at one of those top tier programs?
Well, I'm getting a little old now, so frankly, it's a little hard to remember being a freshman and having mandatory study hall. But if I remember correctly, the resources were almost unlimited at a place like that. I mean, you had anything and everything you needed. If you needed a tutor for a psychology class or a math class, I mean, they were gonna provide somebody to help you out. We had mandatory study hall on Sunday nights. I do remember that, from, call it, 5 to 7. So we'd get done with. We'd have our meetings all day after a game. We'd go sit, we'd go have dinner, and then go straight to study hall. And if you were keeping up with your grades, which I was not, like the best student in the entire world, but I did enough to keep up with my grades and sort of, stay out of trouble.
Right.
That was kind of it. They weren't going to babysit you. I mean, they would make sure you were going to class, and of course, those types of things that you do everywhere. But I was fortunate enough to not have to be babysat, but there were times when I felt like, there were some resources there that, number one, I could have done a better job of using, but that I did a good enough job using, helping me stay ahead on some things school wise. Because it is tough. I mean, it's quite the task, being an athlete and spending all that time and going to school. And so, yeah,
And the expectations on you guys, right? I mean, it's incredibly high pressured, right? It's not just, hey, enjoy. It's not high school. Go enjoy your experience. It's like, hey, we need you to win too and keep your position. Like,
yeah,
I imagine that's
absolutely.
stressful.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you're right. It's incredibly competitive. I mean, you're playing Big 12 football at a school like Texas where, yeah, the expectation is to, find your way back then into a BCS game, if not the national championship. And
Mhm.
by the way, you better maintain, I mean, not that I don't think it's certainly that difficult to keep it 2.0, whatever it was. Like, you should be able to do that.
Yeah.
But you do have to keep up with, writing
Right.
papers, studying for tests and that sort of thing along with getting ready for football games.
And now the travel is like crazy. Taking a moment here to maybe the advice to the SMU athletes who are listening to this, and either even ones at other schools, right? Like, what is something maybe you wish you had thought about or considered while you were at these Texas and then SMU's great institutions where you have amazing resources, amazing professors, um, and you can't go back now. What are some of those pieces of advice you'd give to those students in the moment who still want to pursue a professional career like you did, but
Yeah.
also knowing that you can't play football forever?
Right. I think it's a really good question. I think the number one thing that I wish I would have done, and especially going to a place like SMU where you have an alumni base, and it's the case at Texas too. But SMU is just a little bit of a little bit smaller place. I mean, it's there's there's more attention to be paid on each student. And so I think if I could go back and do it again, I would be extremely uh, diligent and intentional about spending time with those alumni. I think a program like Life After Ball, which I think you're well aware of with what
Mhm.
Lisa Rollins is doing, is truly unbelievable. And those guys that are willing as 18, 19, 20-year-old kids uh, to spend time and let some of these alumni who've gone on to be successful in different fields and industries, let them invest in them. They see that bear fruit, for the rest of their lives. And so, if I could do that again, I think one thing that when I got done playing football, now I wasn't, I came to SMU for 2 years. It was just two football seasons and couple semesters of school. But if I could go back and do it again, boy, I sure wish I had spent I wish I had spent some time
Right.
with that alumni base and engaging myself in that network.
Totally. I think that's, and as we touched on earlier, you only have so much time and you're focused on these things, but things like Life After Ball and having a little bit of foresight to know, hey, go get coffee with, even if it's former players like yourself, to kind of share some wisdom of how to navigate that. So, you finish up a great run, Pump the June got you to SMU. This is not a football podcast. I'll let you and Kyle dive into that more as you guys have the QB Chronicles, but you wrap up that last season. What does the landscape look of going pro? Were there jobs that you had now maybe like, hey, I do want to do this, or kind of where were you at mind wise of like, all right, now it's time to go, fend for myself, make an earning and then living for myself.
Well, as we hit on earlier, I was always going to give professional football a shot. I was fortunate enough to have a pretty good career at SMU. My senior year was a whole lot of fun. Offensively, we had a lot of success, and I owe a whole lot to June and just SMU in general for giving me that opportunity. But I was always going to go try and play at the next level, and so um, my mind immediately went to beginning draft preparation. And so that as soon as our senior year ended, we missed a bowl game. It was time to go start getting ready to play football on Sundays.
And so what do you do for that? What is it? Enter the
So
draft? Is it you get an
yeah.
agent? Like, this is all foreign to me. Like, how do you, as a you're 22, 23 at the time, start to go from an amateur athlete to a professional, and what that looks like and how your life is about to change?
Yeah. So the first thing I did was hire an agent. Just
And
so happens.
what do they tell you? Like, are they
Oh,
kind of giving you the
I mean,
business plan?
yeah, it depends. I mean, you're dealing with some guys who are like the agents that you might see on TV and kind
Yeah.
of I mean, and then you've got some guys, like I was fortunate enough to find a guy and a group who, like, I was not a high round draft pick. I was not a guy who was going to be picked in the first round. I did not have agents knocking down my door trying to sign me. The guy I signed with is a guy by the name of Lee Steinberg, who happened to be June's agent. He
Okay.
also happened to be my dad's agent when he was coming out of college
No
way back.
way.
So he was restarting his firm, kind of building it up again from the ground up. And he and I kind of hit it off, and he had a ton of experience getting quarterbacks ready for the draft. So he said, you're going to come out here to California. You're going to go to San Diego. We're going to get you with a quarterback coach. You're going to start training for the 40-yard dash, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And basically all that was laid out for me. So I did that
Wow.
for a few months, came back to Dallas just before the draft for our SMU Pro Day. And then the draft rolls around in late April, and I'm off to I ended up being drafted in the 6th round, and I'm off to St. Louis as
Wow.
a member of the Rams.
And it's summer, you get a signing bonus and you're off to the races thinking I'm a professional athlete. This is good to go. Is it, hey, none of this is guaranteed. I got a 6th round draft pick. I still got to prove myself to even make this team for this to be a reality.
Yeah, that's one thing about football, and there are signing bonuses, and oftentimes those are guaranteed money, and then you got guys with that are drafted in the 1st round that are getting signing bonuses in the multi-millions of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
If and so those guys often have a little longer leash. And then guys that are drafted a little bit later or undrafted, they're making a little bit of guaranteed money or no guaranteed money. And at that point, it's you better find a way to make it. And so you gotta, I mean, it's an absolute grind.
So how
And
how well were you prepared to manage your own finances and kind of manage this dual pursuit, right? Because I feel like you're mentally have to be so set in on whatever it takes to get better, make your team, but at the same time, you kind of have an influx of cash that maybe you didn't have before that you might have to stretch for a while, right? Was that
yeah,
completely
and so
foreign to you?
one thing to note about that is guys, football players, and in all sports, but we get paid from there's a little bit of money in the off season, but not certainly not enough to live off
Hmm.
of. I mean,
Right.
we get paid from August to January during the season, or September to January during the season, and then you're not making any money essentially for the rest of the year,
Oh, wow.
especially if you're a young guy. So you come into all this money, your first paycheck hits, and you're like, "Wow, I'm rich."
Yeah.
Now, it's a lot of money. I'm
Yeah.
certainly not,
Yeah.
complaining or anything like that, but there definitely is a learning curve as far as, okay, this money is a lot, but it's also only it's really cut in
Right. Your
half if you're
annual
looking at
salary all up front. Yeah.
Yep. If you're looking at splitting it over the course of 12 months. So there was some training in that regard. We did get some financial, guidance and education. And we, especially as rookies, we had classes every week. And so,
Okay.
they do teach you some of those things, but it's a little bit easier to talk about than to actually practice.
For sure. I can't imagine what that's like to, just flip of a coin and your life has changed quickly and you got to then manage that, right? And
Yeah.
whether
And
some
I
people
mean,
have families or don't have families. Yeah.
yeah, it's certainly a huge blessing, but there are a lot of guys who, frankly, came from not much, and they're all of a sudden learning how to deal with millions and millions of dollars and people knocking down their door trying to,
Totally.
trying to get some money from them, and it can be challenging for some people to understand how to say no.
What's the dynamic? I mean, football teams are so big, right? 52 plus people in there between practice squads. And then, like you say, just a vast array of people types, right? From, like you say,
Yeah.
nowadays you see so many players who are kids of players who probably came from a lot and had all the training you need, to the people who came from nothing, and then salaries across the board. Is there a dynamic? And I'm leading this into a little bit more into that business conversation. Is there a dynamic of people talking about, like, here's what I'm investing in, vets pulling you to the side, Garrett, you should look into this. Like, how is that all working inside the locker room that we don't see on the outside?
The better teams that I was on had a great veteran presence, and that was at least a part of the conversation. I mean, we're spending most of our time getting ready for football, and where you're there a long time every day during the course of the week, and a lot of your time is spent getting yourself physically and mentally
Mhm.
ready to play a game on Sunday. But the better teams that I was on had a veteran presence that life skills was part of the everyday conversation and learning about. I mean, sure, I talked about like the rookies. We get that financial training and education and that sort of thing, but um, it doesn't quite hit the same coming from a coach or a member of the
Right.
staff as it does coming from a guy who's 35 and has been through 13 years of NFL wear and tear and has just a little bit better perspective on all of those things and how to do it right and mistakes that were maybe made, and then how you grow from that. I mean, I had a couple guys when I was young that I relied heavily on for my weekly regimen. Like,
Yeah.
this is what I did on Monday. This is what I do on Tuesday. Come in, get a cold tub, get a lift, watch film. Sean Hill, Derek Anderson, and Dan Orlovsky were three that you guys probably see Dan on TV now on
Hmm.
ESPN. But those three, when I was young, were great influences on like what I was doing when I was 30 years old and still, blessed to be able to play football.
Right. Was there anyone in your kind of timeline? And for those who don't know, Garrett played 10 years in the NFL, right? So a lot of teammates. Did you ever come across someone who was like almost using the NFL as a tool for their next thing where they're like, hey, I've got a big real estate portfolio, or I know I'm going to be XYZ person. I'm building this, I'm going to be an investment manager. I'm going to building up all my contacts within the NFL, or someone who you're like, he's like, that guy's making more money outside of the NFL or has a plan. Are there any anecdotal stories of people like that you
Uh,
came across?
Kelvin Beachum comes to mind
Yeah.
first and foremost. I mean, that guy has so much going on. He has absolutely leveraged the SMU network, his network that he's built in Pittsburgh and Arizona.
Yeah.
He has done a fantastic job of using his platform to create opportunity for himself and his family in the long run. I think he's one that comes to mind. I think um, a lot of guys. Um, a lot of the guys that you're referring to would be guys like Kelvin, who maybe aren't the star players, and that, when you're a star player in the NFL, you're getting pulled in so many different directions. And sure, they have other interests and stuff like that, but you're getting pulled in so many different directions. It's hard to like really dive into some other things. There's some other guys that come to mind as far as like really using that platform and, using their time as NFL players to like, give themselves a springboard onto what's next.
I love that. So as we kind of pivot into the next phase, I got it, 2014, you're on the Patriots. There's a famous quarterback there. He never pulled you in for any of his investments or anything like that. He didn't let you in
I
on like
have,
ownership of the Raiders or anything.
I don't think I met the minimum. I don't think I met the minimum investment threshold for that one. My time with Tom was short but incredibly memorable.
Yeah.
You mentioned the Super Bowl. That was awesome. It was the game against the Seahawks where Malcolm Butler intercepts the ball on the goal line after the Seahawks inexplicably don't hand it off to Marshawn Lynch. Um, and then I think the two things that I remember about playing with Tom, or actually, I'll say three things. Number one, he had an unbelievable mastery of the offense.
Yeah.
I had come from, this is just a quick story about like getting ready for a game. I had come from St. Louis where basically every Wednesday we sat in our meeting and we went through the install and we talked through every single play. Okay, we're going to start with the out route, and then we're going to go to the corner, and then we're going to come back across the field to the in cut, and then we're going to check the ball down. So I get to my first meeting with the Patriots, and Tom opens the playbook and he goes right to left, left to right, high, low. And he had every play just completely mastered to the point of, we don't even need to discuss this. Let's get on to more important things, because he fully understood when the coach called a certain play, this is what you want. This is how you want me to read it. Let's move on. Um, the second one was just watching him and how he led guys on that Patriots team. So you had a guy like Julian Edelman, where really you kind of had to get onto him if he was, maybe, I don't know, screwing around is not the right word, but if he wasn't having his best day, he
Yeah.
had to get onto him and, get all over him. And then you had a guy like Gronk where he didn't want to get onto him because he might shut down. So he put his arm around him, take him to the
Right.
side. And he just had an incredible knack for how to lead guys. And I thought that
Wow.
was super impressive. And then the last thing, and this just kind of speaks to what hit him and his character. I probably got matched up against the Patriots I don't know, 4 or 5 times after I left my very short stint in New England. We're
Yeah.
talking like, 4 games and then a couple months the following off season. Um, every single time, preseason, regular season, win, lose, didn't matter. Tom would always make a point to come say hello to me after the
Wow.
game. And I thought that was really cool for a guy who, of his, stature, to number one, even remember a guy like me who had been on the practice squad for, like I said, a few weeks, but also make a point to come say hello. So I will always respect that about him. And I thought that says a lot about his character.
I love that. So as you're going through all this, and you mentioned some qualities about Tom, some of the greats, right? What are some of those things, and how intense being an NFL professional athlete is, that you can translate to the business world? Like, are business people like lazy compared to what you guys go through? Are there
Late,
things that you can implement that you have now, or
yeah.
how does your mind translate between the two? Right? You always hear people say, "I want to hire ex athletes, college athletes, because they have the work ethic." But what are some of those direct translations or things that you'd like to see improve now that you're in, you know,
So
the day to day of us non pros?
yeah, well, I think there's 3 or 4 very clear things, if not more. I mean, you talked about work ethic. Work ethic is for sure one of them. I think if you don't have the work ethic, unless you're an incredibly specially talented person, you will not survive in professional sports.
Hmm.
There are a few guys that can probably get away with it, and those are like the very few and far between. But you learn about how to work hard. If you don't get there with that instilled in you, you learn about it or you're not going to last very long. I think, I think teamwork is a huge one. Um, I always believe that football is the ultimate team sport. It takes 11 guys doing the right thing on every single play, being on the same page in order for a play to have success. If 10 guys do their job perfectly, but the left guard misses his block, instead of a touchdown, it's a sack. And the same thing applies on the defensive side of the ball. And so I think learning how to work together as a team, and then that leads into dealing with failure. I think we're really well equipped to deal with failure. I mean, we didn't go through all the teams I was on, but
Yeah.
I was cut 11 or 12 times, frankly, told I wasn't good enough.
Yeah.
And, you just keep battling back and getting back on the horse and going. So I think, I'm learning, especially in this insurance field, that, you gotta learn
You
to
hear a
deal with
lot of
failure.
no's. Yeah.
You get told no a lot, right?
Yeah.
So, those 3 things I think are the 3 that stick out most to me. I had a 4th one in my mind, and
Yeah.
I talked too much and yeah,
What
forgot
if,
it. So
and a great segue into kind of what you're doing now. What if you were to approach like kind of a new deal or a new opportunity the same way you guys approach game day, right? Like, can do you think about that? Is it hard to get buy-in from the team to say, "Hey, let's review this with the same intensity and kind of focus that you might in offensive game plan?" But like, I mean, I imagine no one else really does that. There could be some competitive advantage to saying, "All right, Garrett, huddle everyone in here. Let's go over this entire business plan, what these guys do. Let's know it inside and out, and kind of blow them away." Or is that kind of hard to replicate outside of a Sunday
Uh,
where?
I think I think there are definitely some aspects of what you're saying that I feel like, again, your original question was, how do guys, athletes have maybe an advantage as they enter the workforce? Well, I think, what some of us lack in experience in any industry, we make up for with some of those qualities. So I think, the willingness to go the extra mile to prepare for something, that was innate for me, for years was, you know, okay, practice is over. That doesn't mean that the day is done. And
Right.
so to continue to push and be prepared as prepared as possible certainly applies to the business world, and getting everybody on the same page, working together as a team, communicating, all of those things. I'm 15 months into this job,
Mhm.
but all of those things have served me very well.
So your last stint with the Patriots, you're kind of realizing maybe it's time now or maybe it's the fam telling you, "Hey, we're done
Yeah.
moving around. You had a great run." Not any, 0.1% of the world can say they did what you did. How did you land on commercial insurance? And outside of that, we talk about it. You kind of realize Dallas. I think some time with the Cowboys maybe helped that as well. Deciding to lean back into this SMU network, and what all did you think about career-wise, right? I think you probably had a lot of options, like, as the things you mentioned, you have the characteristics and kinda some of the things that a lot of firms would look for. Walk us through kind of that mindset, ultimately landing with, BSBD.
Yeah. All right. I'll try not to be too long-winded here, but I'm gonna go back to 2020 to just tell you how we ended up in Dallas.
Mhm,
I was on the practice squad in Cleveland. I was actually pretty frustrated because I had been the backup the year before, and then got relegated to the practice squad in 2020, and all of a sudden I'm sitting in. It was COVID year, so we couldn't really be a part of the team. I was sitting up in the box watching the game, and I read that Dak Prescott broke his ankle. And I thought this could be an opportunity. I mean, obviously, that's not my first
right,
thought, but
right,
like my
right.
agent reaches out to me and says, "Hey,
Be ready.
Dak just broke his ankle. It looks pretty bad. Just letting you know." That
Yeah,
ended up coming to fruition. Brought me here to Dallas. We had just had our first daughter. It was time to buy a home and settle down, and Dallas already was somewhere that we loved. I mean, I talked about that and could talk about it for hours ad
mhm,
nauseum, how much I love Dallas and SMU. So we buy this house. I ended up playing a couple more years. 2022 season finishes up, and I kind of knew at that point my ceiling was to be on the practice squad, and I just felt like it was time to go find something new. Um, and I wanted to get away from football for a little bit. I wanted to just see what else was out there. And as far as your last question there, how did I end up in insurance? Well, uh, basically, I ended up in insurance because when I got done playing football, everybody to a man looked at me and said, "You need to get into real estate or you need to get into insurance." And I said, "Okay, whatever you say," because I didn't
mm,
really have a feel for what I wanted to do. I I knew I didn't want to coach. I had enjoyed my year at SMU coaching a few years prior, but I knew I didn't want to. So I spent 5 or 6 months looking into the real estate world, didn't know a ton about it, didn't know what questions to ask, didn't know where I wanted to go, didn't know which kind of, vertical I wanted to get into. And all of a sudden, honestly, I was starting to think it's time to pivot. And I met with a now coworker of mine, guy by the name of Tristan Weber, who had coached at Highland Park for a long time. And he was telling me that he was into insurance and he had come to work for this group, BSBD. And I said, "Well, hey, would you mind introducing me to your president? I would just, or actually, I first said, would you mind taking me to lunch? I would love to just pick
mhm,
your brain on that." So we went to lunch. As it turns out, the president of our firm is a member at the same golf course I am. We just hadn't met. And we set up a round of golf, met Lucas, and kind of hit it off. And I just felt like this firm had checked all the boxes for me.
mhm,
Um, and so around last Thanksgiving is when I officially started here. So to answer your initial question, I kind of ended up here on accident.
yeah,
But what I'm gathering is that it gives me I said this already, but it checks all the boxes for me. It gives me the freedom to learn about different industries. I love
mhm,
learning. That's like it's like I don't know what niche I'm going to fall into yet. I'm apologize if I'm getting ahead of myself
no,
here on a
you're good.
couple questions,
No,
but I'm loving learning about different industries and what people do on a daily basis. That have started. I just find that to be so fascinating. People have started companies, grown them, and so I get to do that on a daily basis. I love that. This is frankly kind of an eat what you kill type of industry. I love the fact that I can be around my family far more than I was whenever I was playing football.
right,
I get to soccer practices, I get to school drop off and pick up. And so I am
that's
loving
huge.
that. And then the biggest thing that I love is that I feel like I picked the right place to work. I
Yeah,
really enjoy working here at BSBD and learning every day. So
right, and I think, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on is there's gonna be another Garrett, a guy who survives 10 years in the NFL, but is still extremely young, and your story to be able to be transparent about, it's hard, right? Like, it's easy for us who went straight into the workforce to say, "Hey, we kinda navigated this." You did a complete career change, right? That's gotta be intimidating. You gotta, you're coming at it from a different angle, so to hear you talk about, like, the honesty of, like, "Yeah, I didn't really know what I wanted to do," right? I was playing football
yeah,
all the time, and that's fine, but I put myself out there. I'm starting to meet with people. And you probably got luckier than most by finding it that quickly that you're working with, number one, a group that you like, right? You know, you can figure out what it is you're supposed to do, but it's making sure Garrett's in a good place and he likes to be there, because once your energy's and heart's in it, there's no stopping you, right?
Yeah, well, and I'll reiterate because we talked about this earlier, but like, I sure wish during that 2023 year where I was really trying to figure things out that I had done a better job of, uh, just involving myself with that SMU network. And I am fortunate to have been able to be introduced to a lot of the people that I met during the course of that year, while I was figuring it out. But that was definitely a challenge that I didn't anticipate when I got done playing football. And so I think, if I'm, as you asked me earlier, speaking to some of the student athletes like that, yeah, you might get to go play on Sunday, but even if you have a great career, odds are, unless you're Peyton Manning or Tom Brady, you don't get to choose when you're done playing football. Somebody
Yeah.
else chooses that for you. And
Hmm.
so, there will be another job. And I think, I think, yeah, it was a challenge and then on the other side of that, it was a challenge to be entering the workforce for the first time at 32 years old. Um, but I did have all of that experience that I talked about earlier, working with a team, work ethic, the
Totally.
ability to deal with failure. Those types of things can really serve you well as you get going into what's next.
Absolutely. And I think you're doing a great job. I mean, I see a lot of the same events. You're getting back incorporated with the SMU community, and it doesn't
Well,
hurt to be.
a lot of that's thanks to you, by the way. So yes, I no,
Well, I
I
think
appreciate
back
what
to the same thing.
1911
It
group is
doesn't
doing,
hurt
and
to be the quarterback of a football team and people know your name, right? And for the world that we're in, the insurance world, right? You need those soft introductions. So, no, you're doing a great job, and you can tell you're all in. Give us a little PSA on BSBD. What do you guys do? And we know you're still, you know, understanding your role within kind of how you want to approach it. I have my ideas for you. But tell us a little bit about BSVD. Those listening, how can they, work with you?
yeah. So uh, first of all, I failed to mention this earlier, but BSBD, the D there at the end is for Kyle Dixon, who's also an SMU guy and has built a heck of a book around this area, writing a lot of property, and he's been kind enough to kind of take me under his wing and help me in that regard. And I think that's kind of I don't know for sure, but I think that's kind of where I'm going to end up is probably trying to do
Yeah.
some of those property type deals. But we're a generalist independent agency based out of Plano. We yes, we write commercial insurance, but we kind of we're a full service agency that can do everything
Nice.
from personal lines to benefits, and we certainly major in that commercial property and casualty area. But I think you and I were talking before we came on the air. I mean, it's been really fun to start to help some former colleagues, teammates of mine, as they're building, whatever it is they decide to build after
Yeah.
football, after they get done playing, and help them along the way, and become their trusted risk management, insurance guy. And so,
Yeah.
right now for me, a prospect, a good prospect is anyone that owns a business and
Yeah.
deals with insurance. And that's someone that, I just want to learn about what they do and,
Right.
figure out obviously if we can help them, but I'm very much learning. And I think what I've got is a great team. I'll brag on those guys all day long is a great firm that's willing to help me get to the finish line.
Yeah, I think insurance is definitely a world maybe not everyone thinks about coming out of school. They think about their typical finance or even real estate jobs, and it's interesting to see here a lot of your peers or mentors saying, "Hey, Garrett, you should give a look into this insurance thing." Right? Everyone has to buy it. Someone of your background, like you have a huge network, right? From your playing days, from being in Austin, now being in DFW for a long time. Like, there's no one really off the field of someone, or field's probably the right word. There's no one really anyone outside of your network who doesn't have to, like, hear the word insurance and deal with it. Maybe they're not the buyer of it, but it's part of everyone's business. So, you know, like you talk about all your football buddies, all the SMU grads out there who played football, who I've met a ton, are starting businesses or running businesses now. Um, you know, Garrett should be your guy who and the great thing too, no one wants to deal with their own insurance, so they want to hand it
No,
off to have
I mean,
someone
yeah,
do it. So
it's kind of a necessary evil,
right,
and all roads, as you were just saying, all roads lead to insurance. So yeah, I was surprised that this is where I ended up, but I sure am enjoying it because, like I
yeah,
said, the biggest thing for me is learning. I'm enjoying learning about all different industries, all
yep,
different types of businesses. So
yep. They all see it. No, Garrett, this has been fun. I'll have to plug. Outside of your day to day insurance role, you are an SMU podcaster, so everyone needs to make sure they check out Garrett and Kyle's QB Chronicles show. It's only getting bigger and better. I mean, I can see you dual media and profession one day. You're really good at it. And then
well,
also get in line because my son is on the waiting list for Garrett Gilbert quarterback lessons. In how old does he need to be? Like 6 or 7, maybe
we're gonna yeah,
we'll start
we'll give him
spinning
a
it.
couple years so that he can actually lift the ball above his shoulder, and then we'll get started. I think that's probably the only that's the only prerequisite. But by the way, let's not miss the fact that the Quarterback Chronicles was another idea of yours, Mitch, and so that's been a lot of fun. We
It
really
sounds
enjoy it, and
fun.
obviously, if you're an SMU football fan, certainly encourage you to check it out because I think there's some. It's just a super exciting time
It's
here at
awesome.
SMU for all sports, and yeah,
Dude, I cannot wait for football season to come back. I miss the weekly updates and the text chain, and it's gonna be a fun year. But
yeah, it
Garrett, you're the
is.
man. Thanks for doing this. Thanks for all you do for SMU, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, Mitch. I appreciate you.